All right, so here's a webcast for SI number 6. You can see the title there, Competing Visions Reemerge. And this is particularly looking at the George Washington administration. Um, you can see a host of topics that you had to read and collect data from your textbook. And we just kind of want to walk through this a little bit and try to break some topics down and give some perspective. Um, First off, I would ask you to consider, was George Washington's presidency, he's a two-term president, was it an easy presidency or a difficult one? In serving classes on that question, overwhelmingly people identified George Washington's administration and term in office as quite challenging, very difficult. In fact, it's possible that you can make an argument that George Washington had some of the most difficult presidential years of any of the presidents that we've had in our history. And certainly there are some others that have had some difficult and trying times, but I think you can make an argument that George Washington's is right there up at the top. One of the things that gives proof to this is James Madison's comment that we are living in a wilderness without a single footstep to guide us. Everything they were doing in founding this country, and particularly now in the constitutional era, was new. It was experimental. It hadn't been done before. There was no precedent. There was no guide. They were basically making it up as they were going, using their best judgment and wisdom they could. And they knew that every action that they took would have repercussions for the future. So that intensifies the expectations and the decision making that they are going to conduct to make sure that they can build the best foundation for the nation that they can complete in their time. One of the things that we see with George Washington's administration is the word cabinet. This is not something that the Constitution directs the president to do. This is something George Washington did, is to develop a cabinet. The cabinet is a series of officials, cabinet officers that head up different executive departments to help the president run the executive branch of the government. It's a difficult job. One person can't do it themselves, so he needs advisors. If you look at this graphic, you can see President Obama's recent cabinet officials. There's a lot of them, all right, all helping guide different agencies and different departments within the executive office, assisting President Obama to do his job. This is a photo of the cabinet room. When all the cabinet officials meet with the president in the White House, they sit around this room and they're all sitting according to a particular position, according to the title in which they have. This is George Washington's original cabinet. So we see George Washington himself. We see Henry Knox, the Secretary of War, which is an interesting cabinet position. It's no longer called Secretary of War. It's now called the Secretary of Defense. After World War II, we changed the name to Defense so that we would not seem as aggressive in nature. We also have Alexander Hamilton, which you read about quite a bit in our textbook. He's the first Secretary of Treasury, kind of overseeing the commerce and business aspects of the federal government. You have Thomas Jefferson, the first Secretary of State. Makes a lot of sense. He was already working as an ambassador for the United States under the Articles of Confederation, so he carries on his diplomatic duties here in the George Washington administration. And then Edmund Randolph is the Attorney General, which is basically the lawyer for the federal government. That's it. That's the cabinet. Pretty small when compared to the current size of the cabinet that we have today. You don't see John Adams there, even though he's the vice president and technically part of the executive and cabinet of the president. He was largely kind of kept out of these meetings because he seemed irritating to George Washington, which was something that caused John Adams quite a bit of mental trouble, not feeling like he's in the inner circle. We do see political parties starting to develop. We know that there's Federalists, and we know that there's Anti-Federalists as it relates to the debates over ratifying the Constitution. The Federalists keep their name as one political party in the early part of this time of American history, and then the Anti-Federalists become the Democratic Republicans, which don't get confused with today's Republicans. It's actually the distant relative of today's Democratic Party. The Judiciary Act was an important moment. This is more of a congressional moment rather than a presidential moment. But we have Congress passing a law here that the president, George Washington, signs that further establishes what the federal court system would be like and how it would work. The Constitution did not spell out the court system with great detail, so it needed additional laws of Congress to kind of give it some shape. And so we see the Supreme Court is established because of the Judiciary Act of 1789. We have the first Chief Justice appointed to the Supreme Court, John Jay. You see the picture there. Remember, he was a Federalist, author of the Federalist Papers, now operating as the Chief Justice, the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. We have the fight, largely because of the Anti-Federalists, to add a Bill of Rights to the Constitution. That helped win some support from various states so that the Constitution would be ratified and approved. So I'm listing here for you the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. These are basic rights that people have that cannot be taken away by the government. I would hope that you would know these rights. And giving you the last half of the Bill of Rights. A big issue in this SI topic, and also relating to an essay prompt, is how do we see America divided between two rival and dominant political opinions? So we know we had Federalists versus Anti-Federalists, which becomes Federalists versus the Democratic Republicans, and within those parties we see some key individuals that are kind of the main spokesperson. We have Hamilton versus Jefferson. Hamilton taking the Federalist point of view and really pushing that forward, trying to get favor amongst the people for that platform, and then Jefferson representing the Democratic Republicans and that vision. So this is a pretty good list of the differences between the two. I think the pictures at the top indicate clearly that Hamilton sees the United States future is based upon a commerce of industrialization, manufacturing, factories. Jefferson sees the vision of America, one following a rural path. Think about all the frontier land to the west. Jefferson saw that as, the ability to move into that territory and to have the United States become the dominant agrarian power in the world. Opposite ends of the spectrums there. And clearly what happens in our history is that we have both operating at the same time. It's not really one or the other, but that's kind of how Hamilton and Jefferson preached it, was one was better than the other. The other thing I wanted to point out is that Hamilton very much saw a connection to England and its trade, and modeling young America after England, despite the fact that we rebelled and separated from them. And Jefferson was really not a big supporter of Great Britain because of the Revolutionary era and the trauma, and you'll start to see that he has kind of a different mentality in his support, particularly in foreign policy. When we start to see, should the United States be tied with England or tied with France, Hamilton and Jefferson will have opposite opinions on those foreign policy decisions that Washington has to make. Hamilton's plan, economic plan, was one that was really regulated to try to put more of the burden at the federal government than the state government, particularly in relationship to debt. The Revolutionary War was expensive, and each state had its own debt that it was required to pay off, and responsible to pay off. And Hamilton's plan was let the federal government assume all of that debt, and that would kind of free up the states from that burden. Um, but a lot of people were fearful of that because if the federal government was responsible for that debt, then the people that the federal government owed, had to pay it back, would have a lot of um, self-interest in making sure this new government under the Constitution succeeded. Otherwise, they would lose their money. And so some feared that there would be an automatic tie between the wealthy class and the federal government. And with the fear of abuse of power, that was something that disturbed people quite a bit. So there were a lot of critics with this uh, development and regulation of the economy following the Revolutionary years. But Hamilton wins out really and kind of drives the economic policy as Secretary of State. One of the terms there is loose or broad versus strict. And what those terms apply to is how we should read the Constitution. So between the Democratic Republicans and the Federalists, there was strong debate about how to apply the Constitution. The Democratic Republicans said we need to read it black and white. Okay, that's a strict reading of the Constitution. And the reason why they pushed for that was they feared power, and the power of the federal government would be abusive to states' rights as well as individual rights. So if you read the Constitution with a strict literal interpretation, then that keeps power in check and wouldn't abuse state and individual rights. The Federalists, on the other hand, thought that the Constitution was a little bit more adaptive and evolving, particularly according to time, over time, and also depending upon the particular circumstances. They pointed to Article 1:8, which says Congress makes all laws which shall be necessary and proper, which when you look at that, that's a pretty vague and open-ended statement of what Congress can do in its lawmaking. And the Federalists use Article 1:8 to say we have a broad application of what is necessary and what is proper. And so there's a big infighting between these two groups about how to read and how to apply the Constitution. Foreign events created a lot of infighting between Democratic Republicans and Federalists. So when the French Revolution broke out in 1789, which is the beginning of George Washington's administration, by the way, you should know a lot about the French Revolution because you studied this in sophomore year. Remember, A Tale of Two Cities was a novel you were supposed to have read. It should have been a pivotal unit in first semester sophomore history. You might recognize the image up at the top there is the Bastille being attacked by the people, kind of overthrowing power, the king's power. And so that French Revolution completely shifted power in France. Remember, King Louis XVI and his wife were beheaded. And once those revolutionaries created a republic, then they also declared war on all monarchies throughout Europe, which put Great Britain and France in war with one another. So the question is, who should we support? Should we support France during this revolutionary moment? They supported us in our revolution. It seems logical that we would support them in their revolution. Or do we support Great Britain? Even though we rebelled from them, we'd still have economic ties with them. And there we certainly have similarities of culture and way of thought and even government similarities. So there's quite a bit of dispute over this. And as you can see there, the Federalists favored Great Britain. The Democratic Republicans favored France. George Washington, hearing Jefferson advocate for our support of France and Hamilton advocate support for Great Britain, took the path of neutrality, which is an interesting moment for American history to basically say we are going to stay out of European affairs. The reason for that is we were a young infant nation and he did not want to risk America's peace and prosperity by entangling it with one country over another and potentially lose everything. A fascinating element happens in George Washington's administration, and that is the Whiskey Rebellion. So think about how this is similar to the Revolutionary Era. We have a tax protest causing a rebellion, right? In this case, it's George Washington, Commander-in-Chief, who is organizing an army, a federal army, to crush a Pennsylvania farmer rebellion because they didn't like the tax on their farm goods that was used to make whiskey. Um, this is an amazing event. Uh, George Washington literally doesn't go into battle. He carries the troops forward, and other people are commanded into battle. But what a amazing story where a president literally uses the role of commander-in-chief in a armed combat scenario. What this shows is that the federal government had the power and utilized the power to put down a rebellion and to enforce laws, in this case, a tax law. Jay's Treaty. This is the same John Jay who was the Supreme Court Chief Justice. Despite the fact he was the Chief Justice, George Washington appointed him to go to Europe, in particular Great Britain, to be able to negotiate a treaty. You can see there in the golden font are some of the problems that the United States had with Great Britain even after the Revolutionary War. Um, England and France are at war with one another. We're trying to trade with everybody because we're neutral. England started seizing our ships and crew as a way for us to stop and prevent us from trading with France. Remember, after the Revolutionary War, England kept its soldiers and forts in some of the western frontier lands, which always kind of made Americans a bit unsettled. And also, England was kind of encouraging Native Americans to be hostile and attack um, American settlements, which didn't make Americans too happy. So when you take all of these and put these together, there was some growing anti-British sentiment that the nation was exhibiting in terms of words and written editorials and such. John Jay goes to England to try to resolve these conflicts, and he does with a treaty called Jay's Treaty. You can see some of the details there. Um, Britain agreed to remove its troops from North America, which in the Northwest Territories, which we'd been pushing them to do since the revolution was over. We agreed to pay war debts, particularly to loyalists who lost their property and wealth. We offered to pay compensation. Um, and they agree on an exclusive trade agreement so that we wouldn't help their adversary, France. But because of the anti-British sentiment that had happened in the country, Americans were furious with Jay's Treaty because they saw us signing a treaty with a country that had been harming us. And so the quote there, I could find my way across the country by light of my effigy burning. You can actually see that in the picture. People demonstrated their hatred for this treaty and their anti-British sentiment by literally burning the effigy of John Jay. That is the kind of overview and some of the points and explanations of SI number 6.